Please join me in welcoming LCDA member and moderator for the Future Retail session, Sandra Campos, former CEO of Diane von Furstenberg and currently serving on the board of directors of Big Lots.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me now. And I'm very, very, very grateful to be here. It's going to be an incredible session that we have planned today. So I wanted to first say that, I'm thrilled to be here to moderate today's session because if there's one thing that we know, it's that retail is an ever-evolving industry. For the past 10 years, we've seen innovation focused on everything digital, a new consumer that's demanding a lot more about sustainability, experiences, and a must to align with companies' purpose and values. The pandemic has further exacerbated that change as retail was impacted significantly, and we've had the opportunity for the biggest reset that we've had in a long time. So, as consumers in lockdown moved online, brick and mortar stores often remained shuttered, many closed their doors for good. E commerce exploded, with many companies pivoting to digital communications quickly in an effort to meet their customers where they were at home. As the pandemic has dragged on, customers' purchasing patterns have changed dramatically as the impact of the pandemic has altered all of our consumers' perspectives. So we hope that now, as we're coming out of the worst of the pandemic, some of the key questions that we have are: what will the new retail landscape look like? Have consumers largely shifted to online, or are they looking for both an online and storefront experience? And what challenges like supply chains are lingering and driving an increase in consumer prices? So today we're joined by an expert panel of retail CEOs and corporate directors for a very candid discussion on what the future of retail will be. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panel today, which includes Chip Berg, who's the president and CEO of Levi Strauss & Co., as well as the chair of HP Inc. Let's see him. We also have Juan Figueiredo, who's the former CEO of Revlon, who serves as the director on the boards of Deckers Outdoor Corp., Diversity Holdings, and Western Alliance Bancorp. And we have Felicia Thornton, who's the vice chairman of 99 Cents Only Stores and the director of Ayers Acquisition Corp., Convergent Technologies, Floor and Decor Holdings, and Pactive Evergreen. So welcome to everyone. If you wouldn't mind, let's please take a moment to introduce yourselves. We'll start with Chip, then Juan, and finish with Felicia.
Okay, I'm Chip Berg. I'm president and CEO of Levi Strauss. As Sandra noted, I've been CEO now for a little bit more than a decade. Still here to talk about it. Prior to Levi's, I spent 28 years at Procter & Gamble. I'm a brand guy, which is a big part of the reason why I'm here. It's great to be here with everyone. I'm also, as you heard, chairman of the board of HP Inc., and I got a lot of enjoyment listening to Enrique and Aida in the previous session.
Hi, I'm Juan Figueiredo. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. As you heard, I'm the retired CFO of Revlon Inc. I also serve on the board of 3 public companies, including Deckers Outdoors, that has a retail arm. Prior to that, for about 10 years, I was also on the board of PVH, that owns iconic brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. And way back earlier in my career, I was head of M&A for Walmart. So my retail background goes way back.
After spending 30 years in as an executive CFO and CEO in a number of multi-billion-dollar retail and consumer-facing companies, I now spend my time on corporate boards. So I'm on 3 public company boards and a handful of private equity-backed boards. The ones that are probably, and years ago, I was also on the Nordstrom board for a handful of years. The companies that are probably most relevant to this panel are 99 Cent Only Stores, where I'm the vice chair, and that is an extreme value retailer predominantly based in the Western United States. And I'm the also the audit chair there, as well as the Floor and Decor, which is a hard surface flooring company. We did an IPO in 2017, and starting out at around $30, and our stock is trading over $140 today. So it's a company that's gone through lots of change and has a tremendous amount of retail-facing experience. And lastly, I would say I'm also on the audit chair of Pactive Evergreen, which is a consumer-facing business. They support and sell packaging goods to quick service restaurants, grocers, as well as other consumer companies. So with that, thank you, Sandra.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Obviously, we have extreme experts here with a lot of great experience and great words of wisdom that they'll share. So let's just start with some of the biggest changes that the pandemic has brought on. Most importantly, how and where the consumer can shop. You know, obviously when everyone was at home, but also now as the customer shopping habits have changed. So brand and customer experience have moved to the center of the flywheel. And the first question that I have is, and I'll start with Chip, did your company have to accelerate their digital presence and marketing initiatives almost overnight when this happened in March, April of 2020? Or had your digital been a strategic imperative that better prepared your organization to be able to manage through this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question the pandemic accelerated what might have taken 10 years and compressed it all into the last 12 or 18 months. We were already investing pretty heavily in our digital transformation, including investing in our e-commerce business. In fact, it was a key pillar of our strategy now going back for 10 years. One of our big strategic choices was to become a leading world-class omni-channel retailer. Those are the exact words we put in the strategy 10 years ago. And so we've been investing in both brick and mortar as well as our e-commerce business. When I joined the company 10 years ago, our e-commerce business was less than 2% of our total revenues globally. Today, our owned and operated e-commerce business is more than 8%, and our total digital footprint is about a quarter of our total business. So that includes pure play retailers like Amazon or Tmall and those guys. But there's no question that when the pandemic hit, we doubled down our investment in e-commerce, and we pulled forward a number of initiatives that we already had on our roadmap, pulled them forward because we knew it was going to be critical. We immediately turned our stores when we closed them. We turned our stores into mini fulfillment centers. We had the capability to ship from stores, and that was an important capability because we needed to get inventory, seasonal inventory in particular, out of our stores. So when we closed the stores, our store managers went in every single day and they filled e-commerce orders. But we also built new capabilities like order online, pickup curbside. We put that, into place very, very quickly, which was essential as the lockdown opened and people were able to start going back out. So we were very, very quick to respond to the pandemic, and a big part of it was doubling down on our, digital investments during the pandemic, and it's helped us significantly. I would also say that we saw a huge pivot to our e-commerce business. I think in the first 2 quarters of the pandemic, which for us was our second quarter a year ago and our third quarter, 70% of the consumers that came to our e-commerce, our owned and operated e-commerce site, were new to our e-commerce site. Not necessarily new to the Levi's brand. It's kind of hard to tease that out, but they were new to e-commerce. And I think it's going to prove to be fairly sticky. A number of consumers are going to go back into the store, but a lot of consumers that started ordering online for the first time during the pandemic, they're going to continue to use that as a channel as we go forward. I'm pretty confident we're going to see that, but there will be some shift back to brick and mortar, and we've already started to see that.
And of that 70%, did you see the same across all demographic and age groups, or was that the case, or
What was really interesting, it was more the older consumer, so kind of older millennials and up to really old people like me, that many were consumers that I am sure never ordered online before, and when they went into lockdown and that was the only option, that's what they started to reach for. So so it definitely accelerated that, but it was across all demographics. We saw a lot of new young consumers who might have been new to the Levi's brand. We did a lot. We doubled down on our marketing as well online, digitally. The music festival season disappeared last year, and we show up in music festivals in a big way. So we decided to bring music festivals to people's home. And we had the Levi's 501 concert series every night at 5:01 p.m. We had a live concert series by one of the artists that we work with, performing from their living room. And that went on for a couple of months. And so we just tried to continue to engage with our consumers and our fans digitally as best that we could, especially during the period of lockdown when people were looking for things to do. We had online tailoring videos to teach people how to make things out of old denim and how to repair their denim, and a lot of interest in that as well. So it was all about just continuing to engage our fans and find ways to keep the brand relevant and front and center in front of our consumers.
Really smart. Obviously, that has been the defining factor in so many different businesses. So, Felicia, with the companies that you've been associated with and that are front and center consumer companies, how did you experience that? And what do you see that was different? You know, whether they were investing in digital beforehand or if they had to pivot right away?
I would say a combination of both. And it was really kind of a barbell. So on the one hand, with 99, they did not have buy online, pick up in store. They went into a test or a pilot in a pretty aggressive fashion with with Instacart, and partnered with them. And as you can see in that space, so many others have gone in with Instacart. And in fact, the other side of that continuum was floor and decor. And floor and decor is hard surface flooring. That's really not something that lends itself highly to buying online and picking up in store, or frankly, being delivered. But what they did do was, and again, I'm sure Chip had the same perspective, they focused so much on employees and employee safety. They immediately shut down their stores, even though they didn't have to, because they are an essential business, to figure out what was the best thing for both their employees and then their customers. And what happened was everyone was still doing projects in stores. You still had contractors. So you had people whose livelihood was being potentially impacted. What they then did was gradually open up, but actually pushed a lot of their footprint outside and accelerated their use of technology to make sure that there was the ability for people to have information fed to them on when their order was ready, when it was available to be picked up. And that has massively accelerated internally within their business. And also it's helped their contractors and pros and do-it-yourselfers that have been able to say, you know what, I can be more efficient with my time. I think that's the other dynamic that I'm seeing in the businesses that I'm involved in is what's efficient for the customer. How does it make the customer feel better about the investment of time? And how do they make sure that they are kind of working with providers and retailers that are thinking about what's best for the customer?
And did it change the way that those, like even Floor and Decor as an example, that they were focused on the storytelling aspect? You know, Chip was mentioning some of the videos that they were producing.
I would say with Floor and Decor, the other piece that they did, it was probably less about curating stories, and it was more about how do we make this easier for the customer. So if you go onto their website, you'll see that they have an installer app. So they have accelerated the investment there. So you can go and see what these new products look like if you upload a picture of your room. And it's pretty amazing. And it's a lot more interactive and engaging. The other piece they did was they made sure that the designers that are in their stores were available, you know, to engage with customers in any form that the customers wanted to engage in.
Amazing what the innovations are. Juan, what about you and your experiences and as it relates to the investment in digital, when that started and what changed?
Yeah, so in my experience, I would say the effect of the pandemic was to magnify or accelerate trends that were already in place. And if you were ready, as was the case for Deckers, one of my boards, and already had digital capabilities in place, you were in a very good place. So Deckers has had one of the highest growth period right since the pandemic started, because they already had a digital strategy in place, very robust e-commerce business, fulfillment capabilities out of a couple of DCs. So everything, the supply chain was ready. I think, but also just as important, there was a lot of information already about consumers, whether it's through the e-commerce channel or through the stores, any direct to consumer contact, they do a really good job of capturing the information. So they could tailor the product mix to the shifting demands of consumers. Because what happened is when people started staying at home, all of a sudden slippers, which are seasonal in nature, became a hot selling product. And so those kinds of insights were important to make sure that the company had the right product at the right time. Also, the marketing strategy was key. It was already very strong digital marketing connections with the consumers that was already in place. In some cases, just shifting industry for a second, like my former industry in cosmetics, you get a consumer that about 80% of the time still shops in brick and mortar, but when she walks into that store, she's already made up her mind. The opportunity for the impulse sale is much less than it used to be in the past. So she does all of the research online. She may go to YouTube, she may go to Amazon, but and she goes to influencers, of course. When she walks into that store, 85% of the time, she knows what she's going to get. So if you don't have, even if you have good e-commerce fulfillment capability, but you are not where she's doing the research with your digital marketing, you're not even in consideration. The product doesn't matter, doesn't matter where you are in the store because she's not going to look at you. So I think those are the key lessons from the pandemic. You got to have a holistic strategy, how to be able to move fast and follow the consumer because they change fairly fast.
Absolutely. So each one of you guys has mentioned a little bit as it relates to marketing. And one of the things that has come out of the pandemic is now that we have so many more people shopping online, the cost of customer acquisition, the cost of digital marketing, et cetera, has increased. So what have you seen as it relates to the importance of what that is today, where you're really investing, whether it's in loyalty programs, segmentation? How has that changed in the past 2 years from what it was to what it is today? I'll start with Chip.
I mean, it has gone up. It's a classic supply and demand kind of issue, but we've gotten a lot smarter about how we reach and connect with our consumers. Part of our digital transformation has been to double down on data science. We're actually upskilling over 100 of our own employees to become data scientists this year alone, and we're going to continue that program into next year. But we've been investing pretty significantly into data science. We've got a CRM program, we have a loyalty program, and data science just makes us that much smarter about how to connect with a consumer on an individual basis and really personalize the communication and for that particular consumer. So that's been a big part. We're leveraging data science now, even in how we buy our media. So I'm a marketing wonk, a brand guy, as I said, and it is, I think in today's world, it's so much more sophisticated than it was, 40 years ago when I was a brand assistant, when you put a piece of advertising on 3 national television networks and you'd reach 80% of the US 3 times a month. Now it really is about connecting individually with the consumer in a message and in a way that is really, really relevant for them. And data science has played a key role in helping us to do that in a much smarter way. I think we're much more in touch with our consumer. The fact that we've got retail stores and we're, connecting with them in person, day in and day out, it just makes us that much more in touch, which makes our marketing, more relevant, and it connects with the consumer.
I think that's a great takeaway in terms of the data science aspect of it, because many other industries and sectors are using it, but retail is now coming into it. So
retail, one of my big things when I joined from outside of apparel and outside of retail, coming in from packaged goods, was just how analog apparel, especially, but apparel retail really has been. And so this real focus on digitally transforming our company has been a major priority for us for the last couple of years. And not just e-commerce, but every aspect, everything we do, we're trying to digitize it.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot of solutions that are new technology solutions out there to help. So I'm just going to switch to Felicia for a second, because of stores, and I know you've had various examples, but obviously the priority was, and you mentioned before, employee customer safety, and then we had buy online, pickup in store, curbside pickup. Some of the stores turned into micro fulfillment centers. What type of undertaking was this for the stores? And do you see that things now have changed as it relates to the employees and how they feel about the company having taken care of them and prioritize their safety?
I would say, maybe stepping back for a moment and thinking about it from a board perspective. From a board perspective, this was a time where boards were highly engaged, at least on the boards that I sit on, because every single day something was changing. Every single day there was information that was coming out that people were having to react to. And what I would tell you, most of the retail-facing companies, the boards that I'm on, they were had a huge pulse on what was going on from the CDC. And so they were following CDC guidelines because honestly, in some of the states they were in, there was such conflicting advice. And I think at the end of the day, especially with retail, you are as good as your people. And investing in your people is paramount and critical. So most of those management teams were so focused on how do we keep our people safe? How do we make sure that there is an appropriate level of comfort for those individuals that are going to work every day? And especially in the essential businesses, if they don't have enough employees, then down the line, people either don't have food or they don't have product that is filling their livelihood. So I would say they, in addition to the CDC rigorous guidelines that they followed, they then kind of sequenced into masks. And you guys have probably heard the stories. In many cases, many of those employees had to bear the brunt of a lot of negative reaction from the communities that they served. That was probably balanced by an overwhelming response from the individuals that were able to get their products and have a positive interaction. So I think the takeaway there was, as a board, staying in lockstep with your management team, understanding what the process was that they were doing to immediately calibrate when there was mask mandates, when there was plexiglass mandates, when there was distancing mandates, as well as what does that look like, going forward. So as a board member, I would say it took a lot more conversation and discussion. And frankly, an experienced board was able to give advice and counsel, because at the end of the day, there was a cultural grounding between the board and the management team that it was all about taking care of the employees first and the customers second.
It was a busy year for everyone on the board. So let's just switch into technology for a minute, because as businesses continue to move on and the customer's clearly spending money, but we're now seeing that there's a new way for the consumer to shop. So Juan, you mentioned earlier that customers research online, buy in store, and vice versa. They want a more personalized and frictionless experience. Retailers want more data, as Chip was mentioning before, and omnichannel is no longer just a buzzword. It really is about meeting the consumer where they are. So what do you feel from your perspective and what you're seeing as well in terms of the transformative technology that's becoming more commonplace in stores, whether it's QR codes, AR experiences? How has the tech really supported this transformation, and where are the investments happening, online, offline? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, the important thing is to realize that no one has really figured this out yet. This is evolving. And so you have to be careful where you make your investments, because you don't want to make the wrong bets. But this question brought to mind, I read an article the other day. It was an interview by Forbes magazine. It's a small retailer. The founder is a guy named Ben Kaufman. And he said, he founded a retailer called Camp. He said, retailers have to eventize their stores. It's got to be something to do, not a chore. And so that is key. There's got to be a reason for people to come to your store, not just to buy, if you can. And there are some examples of people who've done that or have been doing that even before the pandemic. For example, in the cosmetics industry, you take Ulta. They have been gaining share from everyone. But why? Because you go to that store and it's an experience. You can do your hair, you can do your nail, you learn about products, you can interact with people, and it's a whole experience, and you buy your cosmetics at the same time versus a very cold experience online. So nobody has figured out how to bring the two together, but everybody knows that you have to. You have to find a way to make the in-store experience closer to the online experience, to the digital experience. And so there are all kinds of experiments, but I think the one that will pay off the most is, to paraphrase Chip, is data. I think the data that you can collect, whether it's through e-commerce or in the store. In the store, it also happens post-sale through the loyalty program. It's key, the collection of that data, but also that you have the right scientists, the right people in place to analyze the data and figure out what does that mean in terms of your experience in brick and mortar in store, but also what does that mean in terms of the experience online. And what that is going to be in terms of investment, I think is going to be different for everyone. Depends where you are on the investment curve or on your journey, digital journey. But I think it's very telling that we see Amazon, for example, investing or experimenting with brick and mortar.
And
Yeah, or
I
you
would just
build
jump in
your own
there,
team like Chip is
Sandra,
doing at Levi's.
and also say, when you look at it, some of the other pieces that are going on are kind of the flip side to that. You look at what Kroger's doing, and they've told people that they're going to enter the Florida market, and they're not going to have one brick and mortar store. They're going to have it all be warehouse, and it's all going to be 100% e-commerce, as well as in the Northeast. So for them, it's a different strategy and capital play. And I think when we talked earlier, we also see the other piece of that, which is, Allbirds and Warby Parker, who started as DTC or direct to consumer. And they now, in their SEC filings, are talking about adding stores because they want to build brand loyalty. They want to build engagement. And the way that they believe they can build brand loyalty and engagement is by having brick and mortar. So it's an interesting juxtaposition about, where those businesses started and how they are on their maturity curve versus some of the traditional brick and mortar on their maturity curve.
Absolutely. So there's so many topics for us to cover, but I want to make sure that we focus on a couple of key things that are in discussion every single day, one of which is supply chain and the technology that's been developed and the innovation that's happened on the front end of digital and e-commerce. Now, what about on the back end? Now all these new players are coming in. There's a lot of capital being deployed towards back end innovation, technology, self-driving trucks, et cetera. Chip, what is your position in terms of where that investment is going forward? And obviously, looking at supply chain and the technology around that to be able to provide inventory forecasting, to be able to provide visibility and get closer to the customer.
Supply chain is one of the things that's keeping me up at night because I want to make sure that there's a pair of Levi's underneath everybody's Christmas tree this Christmas. And there's no shortage of bad news when it comes to supply chains. We are fortunate in that we don't manufacture in one country. We're a big, huge global company. We have a portfolio of countries where we operate and where we produce our product around the world. So we produce in about 24 different countries. No one country is more than 20%. But there's a real issue. You mentioned autonomous driving trucks. There's a real issue in the trucking industry right now here in the US because truck drivers are retiring at a rapid number. The average age of a truck driver in the United States is 50 years old, and no young kid wants to be a truck driver. Why? Because supposedly someday there's going to be autonomous driving trucks. So why would you want to get into that as a career? And it is one of the big issues right now. If you haven't already noticed, lead times for an e-commerce order have slowed down pretty dramatically just in the last couple of weeks. And we're still, a couple of months, a month and a half away from Christmas at this point in time. So it is going to be a real challenge. We've been, to your question specifically about technology and supply chain, we've been investing pretty significantly in digitizing our supply chain. Surprise, surprise. I keep coming back to this theme about digitizing everything that we are doing in this company, but we're actually manufacturing jeans today. Jeans, I say half seriously that we produce a pair of jeans today almost exactly the way Levi Strauss, the man himself, produced a pair of jeans almost 150 years ago. I mean, they are cut to a pattern today, and that is done by a computer, but jeans are largely assembled by hand. And it is a piece part assembly line type of operation, which ends with finishing the jeans. And, most people around the world want to buy a pair of jeans that look like they've been worn for 3 or 4 years. And sometimes they want a pair of jeans that look like they've been worn for 10 years. That finishing historically has been done by hand with sandpaper and specific tools. We've now digitized it, and we finish about 40% of our product line today is finished using lasers. It strips out that human dimension. It also dramatically saves on water usage. We can use recycled water when we're running the lasers, and it produces a perfectly finished pair of jeans much, much quicker. And we can actually even locate those lasers closer to market and just bring in blanks and finish closer to market. So, that's an out there idea, and we're executing it. I think it won't be long, maybe a couple of years in the future, where we might be able to train a robot to produce a pair of jeans, which would allow us to onshore more manufacturing. I mean, obviously, the holy grail in supply chain is to get your sourcing as close to the market as possible. And so you've got greater speed and greater agility. And, a lot of our product coming into the United States comes from halfway around the world. And that's obviously a challenge with container availability, ship availability, truck availability, port availability. I could go on and on and on. So, that is the holy grail. And I think probably every apparel company is working on that right now to figure out how do they reduce lead times and get their supply chain and sourcing closer to market. And we're doing the same and leveraging digital technologies to shorten the lead time and get closer to market. Well, maybe you could talk about that same question, supply chain. We could all talk about supply chain for a long, long time, I think.
I think you're right. I think, Juan, you want to give what your companies are seeing?
I guess what I was going to say is, I was kind of hoping that as we get through the holidays, that the supply chain issues that everybody is experiencing would begin to normalize sometime in the first half of next year. And the more I dig into this, the less confident I am that is going to happen. I think we've got major structural and systemic issues right now that are going to have, it's going to take, I think, a much longer time for us to reach a stable environment again from a supply chain standpoint. I mean, if anybody's tried to buy furniture lately,
everything, generators.
It's everything, yes.
It is everything.
Well, and I would tell you, if you guys think about it, even if it's domestically produced, and Chip, you made this comment, just the freight and transportation is been such a pain point for everybody. And when you think about, broadly, I think most of the companies that I interact with or I know folks on boards of, they're looking at the supply chain dynamic being a challenge for the better part of all of 2022. So
yeah, same with us. Same with us. It looks like things actually may get worse before they get better. It's ports and trucks, and that's not going to change anytime soon, in spite of some of the efforts that are going on. And some of the trends, like what Chip mentioned, retirement of truck drivers, talent sourcing, are just getting worse. Those are not getting better.
What changes or trends have you seen with regard to the Latino consumer? Does anybody want to take that?
Okay, Mr. Moderator, do you want to start?
I'll let one of you guys start. I asked the question. Yeah, I'll come back.
So I can take a shot because I have seen recently some data about by ethnicity or whenever it's available, which is actually hard to get since that's not always reported. But what I have seen is that there is no difference in Latino versus any other consumer. Really, where you see the difference is more by income level than by ethnicity, national origin, or any other. So that if I make, let's say, $50,000 a year, I'm Latino, I'm more likely to have similar consumption habits than someone who makes the same amount, whether they're white, African American, or anything else. There are some specific channels for specific groups, though, and that's the only difference we've seen. But generally, broad habits, no difference.
I would say in the consumer businesses I'm in, similar dynamic. The one big piece I would say that during the thick of COVID is less celebrations. So I don't know that I believe that that was not unique to the Latino customer or consumer, but it was very prevalent in some of the businesses that I interact with, where they saw a dramatic decline in party and events and graduation celebrations. And the converse, as soon as vaccinations were more prevalent, this past graduation season and holiday season, there was, an improvement.
Yeah, I guess I don't have much to add except that, Levi's is an incredibly democratic brand with a small d, I guess, in that it's the number one brand in the United States and number one brand globally. So we cut across all demographics. And, no matter how you want to slice the demographics, we cut across all demographics. And the Latino consumer is a very, very important consumer to us, but not hugely distinctive in many ways. We've seen some of the same things that you talked about, Felicia. The good news is as things started to open back up again, as the economy started to open back up, people started to get vaccinated, people started to go out and go shopping. There was a definite need to kind of update your wardrobe, and because people needed to get rid of the slippers and sweatpants that they bought during the pandemic and get back to wearing real pants, real clothes, real shoes. And as they started to go back out and started partying and celebrating and things like that again, and that's been really, really good for our business. Sandra, we've done our best to kind of dance through this without you.
You're back.
We're glad you're
So
back.
much for technology, right? So much for technology.
Mm-hmm.
You guys answered a very good question. And, I think it's been incredible just to hear about the innovation that has taken place. I want to give kudos to Chip and Levi's and what you're doing in terms of developing your own data scientists internally. I think that's a great takeaway. Juan, all the lessons that you've been able to share in terms of what beauty has done and how the consumer is really researching online and the omni-channel need. And obviously, Felicia, I think what you've expressed and shared as it relates to just the customer, the in-store experience, and being able to kind of be where that customer is and make sure that you're thinking about them at all times. I think that has been a big change in retail. I'm sure there'll be much more to come, many more challenges, because it's a constant roller coaster ride, as we all know that we've been in this for many, many years. So I appreciate everyone. Question, obviously, we're here with the LCDA, and it's in terms of including diversity on the board and building a board that reflects the customer base. You were just talking about the Latino consumer and the stakeholders, obviously. So how do you work with your nominating gov committees to ensure that you're increasing that diversity on board? It's a clear topic now that's happening. No one is really able to avoid it right now, but how are you working together to be able to ensure that diversity of experience, the diversity of thought, of age, et cetera? How are you seeing the importance of that, and how much of a priority is that now today?
Well, I'll go first. And I'll talk about it from two different perspectives. If anybody heard the previous panel, they heard about the board that I'm chairman of, which is HP Inc., which is, we say it's the most diverse board in tech. I think it may be the most diverse board in the Fortune 500. And that's in part because HP separated 6 years ago from the big HP into Hewlett Packard Enterprise and HP Inc. And it's not every day you get to build a board from scratch. And, back at the time of the separation, the then CEO and chairperson built intentionally an extremely diverse board. And Enrique and Aida talked about it at the previous panel. There's just huge power in that diversity. On my board, at the Levi Strauss & Company board, we also have a very diverse board, and it has been built over time, not all in one shot. And in fact, we just added a Black member to our board over the last 9 or 12 months or so. I met him in person for the first time, literally last week. The whole board process was done, an interview process and everything was done virtually. And I happened to be in Chicago, and I finally met him, Elliot Rogers, who was the former CIO and previously Chief Supply Chain Officer at Ulta Beauty, and just left for Project 44. But terrific guy. But we've been very, very intentional, I guess is the word that I would use, in how we've built our board. We are driven by criteria. So we disclose it in our 10K every year, the different skill sets and experiences that each board member has. And then we intentionally recruit for diversity as well. And I'm super proud of the diverse board that we've got. And I believe it results in a better board and better outcomes for the business overall.
Felicia?
I would agree with everything that Chip said. And I would say, interestingly enough, when I joined the SPAC board, because like he mentioned about HP, when you get to build it from scratch, it today is a board that has a majority diverse and underrepresented population, because you're starting from zero. Conversely, I would say as chair of the Nom Gov committee at Floor and Decor, we have over the course of the last 2 years included and increased the underrepresented groups in a significant fashion. And the other piece I just put out there as a plug for LCDA is I've had the pleasure of working with Ozzy and Esther to introduce them to CEOs at a couple of other companies when those CEOs and their NomGov chairs were looking to drive diversity as opposed to always going the recruiter route. I would say LCDA was a great resource there, and frankly helped drive extensive diversity on the board that they engaged with.
Thank you so much. Juan, you have like 5 seconds.
Okay, so the past 10 to 12 years, I've seen a change for the better, where you had to remind your NomGov committee to include diverse candidates on the list, to now basically people like us are more of a resource to help them ensure that diverse candidates are on the top of the list. Every board is looking for diverse candidates. Now, having said that, Latinos were the most underrepresented minority. So the LCDA is doing a great job, but we need to do a lot more, because I think we complain less. And as usual, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yes, and Latinos are 1% of board seats, so it's so definitely something to work on. Well, I have great respect and admiration for all of you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for the prep time, and thank you for spending the time today. And thank you to Ozzy and Wendy and everyone for allowing us to do this at LCDA. Thanks, everyone.
It's a great pleasure.
Thank you.